Before the season, a lot of the top programs in college football were needing new quarterbacks, including Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. The Bulldogs have had consistent quarterback play, ranging from guys like Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm, Stetson Bennett, and most recently Carson Beck, but moving in a new direction in 2025, they'd have to rely on Gunner Stockton breaking out. At first, it looked like he was going to be an average quarterback at best, but this past weekend, Stockton proved he was elite and was worth all the hype he had coming out of high school. At one point, Stockton was a 5-star recruit, one of the most legendary players in Georgia high school football history, and is now looking to take the next step with the Bulldogs and become one of the better quarterbacks in the country. In today's video, I want to do a spotlight on the rise of Gunner Stockton, as we're going to go through his crazy record-breaking high school career and just how good he's been this season so far. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the insane rise of Gunner Stockton. So in order to understand how Stockton got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Imagine this: you're a freshman at a high school in North Georgia, and you see a helicopter make a landing on your high school campus. That helicopter contains Kirby Smart, and he wants to talk to you about being the quarterback at the University of Georgia. That would end up happening on January 31st of 2019, and Stockton has been talked about for quite some time in the area. He's always been known, and his relationship with football goes way back in time. George Bobo liked working with young kids as a professional trainer, and he knew and liked Rob Stockton. He ended up making a request that he would work with his 6-year-old son before morning school started. He'd become his quarterback trainer at just 6 years old, and at 6:30 in the morning, they would meet and train. He ended up getting the name of Gunner because of his great-grandfather, who served on a plane in World War II and was referred to as Gunner Stockton. They liked the ring to it, so that's why they decided to name him that. The Stocktons had lived for generations in Rabun County, which is located in northeast Georgia, and has some absolutely beautiful scenery. He ended up growing up in a town known as Tiger, which had about 300 people. He was different from any child George Bobo had ever seen, as he said, quote, "After I watched him for the first time, I said, goodness gracious, he's got a great arm, and he's an athlete. When a 6-year-old gets up at the field house at 6:30 in the morning wanting to throw, you know there's something going on there." Flash forward all the way to middle school, Bobo recalls a middle school Stockton being able to hit receivers 65 yards down the field. He was playing on the 8th grade team as a 6th grader, and it ran in the family genes, as his dad was an all-conference safety at Georgia Southern. Rabun County might be small and isolated, but it is on the football map. That same town of Tiger ended up producing former Georgia Bulldog tight end Charlie Werner, who ended up winning a Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers. Eventually, Stockton would arrive in high school, and while you don't want to lead the car on the hype train for young players, he ended up living up to the hype. Through his first 2 seasons and 26 games at Rabun County, he had thrown for 6,300 yards and 77 touchdowns, while completing 70% of his passes. He also ran for just under 2,000 yards and 36 touchdowns, and Stockton was a bona fide star. In terms of his recruitment, he ended up getting his first offer at a North Carolina camp. He was asked to meet with the head coach in the office, and the family wondered if he had done something wrong. They apparently loved his arm strength and accuracy, and Larry Fedora decided to offer him. Appalachian State was soon to follow suit, and eventually he would blow up. Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, LSU, USC, and Florida all gave Stockton offers, and now he became the #1 quarterback in the class according to some scouts. Eventually, he would make a decision on where he would go, and he would choose the South Carolina Gamecocks. Will Muschamp had pulled off a major win on the recruiting trail, and he went to South Carolina because of the connections. His high school head coach was Jabo Shaw, which was the brother of former South Carolina quarterback Connor Shaw, and Mike Bobo, who was a coach at South Carolina, was the son of the same guy who taught him how to throw a football at 6 years old. There was a ton of connections to South Carolina, and he would follow in the footsteps of his hero Connor Shaw. He said he felt very comfortable with the Gamecocks, and it was just home to him. At the time, Stockton was a 5-star recruit, and as a junior, he had thrown for 3,200 yards and 45 touchdowns, while rushing for just under 1,600 yards and 26 more touchdowns. In an age of spread offenses and dual-threat quarterbacks, many thought he was a potential superstar. Then, everything would change. Will Muschamp was fired, and Bobo was promoted to interim head coach, but would then move on to a new school. This put him on flip watch, and that would end up happening. Kirby Smart always gets his guy, and while it took a while, it finally happened. He had a good relationship with Todd Monken and Buster Faulkner, and those relationships made it an easy choice for him to go to UGA. On the field, he was always a winner, as he started 4 years and closed in on numerous state records, which were held by guys like Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. He would set the record for touchdowns in a career, as against Grovetown, he entered the game with 215 touchdowns and ended up finishing with 4. It placed himself at the top of the leaderboard, and Gunner Stockton was now in Georgia high school football history. His high school coach said, quote, "Gunner is one of those special players that doesn't come around very often, and I'm fortunate that I get to be around him every day and that I get to coach him." In total, he had over 13,652 yards, 177 passing touchdowns, and then 4,400 rushing yards and 77 rushing touchdowns. As a high school quarterback, he set the state record in career passing touchdowns, passing yards, and rushing touchdowns. According to 24/7 Sports, though, he was bumped down to a 4-star recruit, the number 7 quarterback, and the 124th best player in the class of 2022. I honestly have no idea why, but how did he end up doing at Georgia? Well, let's take a look. When Stockton would arrive at Georgia, he had a ton of fanfare, but he was following in the footsteps of another legendary high school quarterback from Georgia by the name of Brock Vandegrift. This was now back-to-back classes in which Kirby had pulled off a big-time Georgia high school football quarterback, and through his first couple of seasons, Stockton would not do much in a Georgia uniform. He came into one of the most crowded rooms in the nation, as it featured Stetson Bennett, Brock Vandegrift, and Carson Beck, all of which were super talented players who were highly recruited, or at least highly regarded, like Stetson Bennett was. Gunner Stockton would wait and be patient, and through his first season in 2023, he finished with 148 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception. Going into 2024, he would be the backup to Carson Beck, who had decided to stay at Georgia, and he was waiting for his opportunity and preparing. Through most of the 2024 season, he had finished with 354 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks, and he was just the backup going into their SEC championship game. After a weird matchup with Georgia Tech, Georgia was in a spot where they really needed to win the SEC championship to feel safe about the playoff. And after Carson Beck got hurt, all of a sudden, Stockton had to come in the second half and win the game. Staring at a 6-3 deficit with a conference title and a playoff spot on the line, Stockton did not flinch. Kirby Smart said, quote, "This kid is a winner. He is special." He ended up finishing 12 of 16 for 71 yards and an interception, but he would lead them to a win. They ended up getting back to the college football playoff, and he was put into a near impossible situation. He would all of a sudden have to start against Notre Dame in their playoff game, and unfortunately, it didn't necessarily go according to plan. Stockton would play okay, as he'd go 20 of 32 for 234 yards with a touchdown, and luckily did not have an interception. They would end up losing 23-10, and Stockton was just young. For anybody to believe that he'd go in and win that game was kind of ludicrous to me, but it left enough doubt in some people's heads that maybe Georgia should go after a transfer quarterback. But Kirby Smart didn't. Their quarterback room for 2025 was honestly thin, as they had Ryan Montgomery and Hezekiah Millender as true freshmen, and then they also had Ryan Puglisi, who was coming off of an injury. They were really going all in on Stockton, hoping that he would break out and perform. Through the first 6 games of the season, Stockton was pretty good. He ended up having 4 touchdowns against Marshall in week 1, and then it also led them to a victory over Austin Peay. He came in on the road against number 15 Tennessee and had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that one, and then against Alabama, he sort of disappeared a bit. He only had 130 yards passing with 1 touchdown, and they'd end up losing by 3. Some thought Stockton wasn't good enough, but he's continued to lead Georgia to wins. He ended up having 3 touchdowns and a win over Kentucky, led them to a gutsy win on the road against Auburn, which was somewhat controversial, and then this past weekend, he had his coming out party. Against number 5 Ole Miss, he'd have an incredible game as he'd throw for 289 yards and 4 touchdowns, and also ran for 60 yards and a touchdown on the ground too. They would beat Ole Miss 43-35, and this was now the best game on his resume by far. Many are saying this is the best performance of Gunner Stockton's career, and it now looks like he might become a potential superstar for the Bulldogs. He's starting to get confident, he's knowing the offense better, and he's performing well against good teams. Stockton will still have to face off against Florida, Mississippi State, Texas, Charlotte, and Georgia Tech, with honestly those games against Texas and Georgia Tech being circled for me. This could be the biggest game in that Georgia Tech rivalry in a long time, and Stockton could be a legend if he wins that game. I don't necessarily think Gunner will win the Heisman or anything, but he's proving that he's a really good quarterback and is setting himself up to have an incredible 2026 season. We'll have to wait and see how things play out, but so far in the year, Stockton has 1,500 yards passing with 10 touchdowns and 1 pick, and also has nearly 300 yards and 7 scores on the ground. He's a star quarterback, just like we all thought he was coming out of high school, and it's cool to finally see him having success. But what do you guys think? If you're a Georgia fan, what do you think of Gunner Stockton? How good do you think he is? And which player should I spotlight next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.